She looked me dead in the eye and said it like she was offering me a second helping of potatoes. I'm going back to my ex just like that, over grilled salmon anniversary dinner. 15 years together reduced to a throwaway line between bites. Carla didn't flinch. She even smiled like she was finally releasing a secret she'd been rehearsing in the mirror for weeks. Then she added, "Cool as a breeze. I never really loved you, Mark." I stared at her for a second, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I was mildly impressed by the delivery. She had waited for our anniversary, wore the dress I bought her 2 years ago, made sure our daughter was away for the weekend, and then stabbed me with an emotional scalpel so sharp it didn't even bleed right away. I set my fork down, smoothed the napkin, nodded. "Then you should go." No shouting, no chair-scraping melodrama, just the clean click of finality. She blinked, thrown off by the lack of fight. That's what she wanted. Drama, a tantrum, a scene, something she could weaponize later. But I didn't give her that. I gave her silence. That's what broke her rhythm. She expected the old Mark, the patient one, the dull one, the provider. What she didn't know was she just triggered a whole other version of me, one she'd never met and wouldn't like. Back home, she stomped around like a high school girl who just won a breakup. Loud packing, passive-aggressive phone calls on speaker, fake laughter at her ex's jokes. God, that man's voice sounded like a clogged drain. She walked past me in the hallway, dragging a suitcase like she was starring in her own Lifetime movie, looked me in the eye and said, "Guess I'll finally get half of everything." I didn't answer, just leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, and watched her walk out of the life she thought she understood. She thought she detonated a bomb. What she didn't realize was, I was the one who lit the fuse 7 years ago. Now, before I go further, and it does get better, you should know something. Over 90% of the people who hear stories like this never hit subscribe. And honestly, that tiny gesture motivates the team more than you can imagine. So, if you're still here, consider it. We appreciate it more than you know. Anyway, I stayed in the kitchen a while, not because I was processing grief. I was running through protocols. When Carla says half of everything, what she really means is half of what she assumes exists. She has no idea about the trust, the layered entities, the ownership transfers that occur automatically when a spouse voluntarily departs the marital home. It's like watching someone leap from a plane with a parachute they pack themselves. Not realizing I'd quietly swapped the ripcord, I walked into the office, turned on the light, pulled out a small black box I hadn't touched in years. Inside a flash drive, notarized documents, the original postnup and the trigger letter, and signed. Until now, I sat down, took out a pen, and wrote a single sentence. As of 10:04 p.m., spouse Carla and Whitman has voluntarily vacated the shared residence with intent to end marriage. Clause 9 triggered, signature, date, upload, encrypted. By the time her Uber pulled out of the driveway, she was already a guest in a world she no longer owned. But she didn't know that yet. She thought she'd just humiliated me, left me gasping in emotional wreckage. What she'd really done was open the door to the one game I play better than anyone. Structure. And tomorrow? Tomorrow would be the first move. The door didn't slam. It clicked. Quiet. Final, like a vault ceiling shut. I waited exactly 13 seconds after the sound, just long enough to hear the Uber crunch gravel down the drive. Then I walked to my study. Not out of impulse, not out of rage. I had no emotions left to spend on Carla. I wasn't angry. I was liberated. The lamp on the desk flickered to life with a warm glow. Familiar, unchanging, unlike her. Laptop boot sequence, local key decryption, one biometric confirmation. The desktop loaded like it had rehearsed for this moment. And in a way it had. For 7 years, I'd built contingencies like a man layering sandbags before a hurricane.
Carla always assumed I was obsessive about paperwork because I was old school, that I liked control, that I was boring. She never realized I was building a fortress. I navigated to my asset tree, a private encrypted diagram that looked like a spiderweb had gone to law school. Every LLC, every holding company, every silent partner arrangement, all legal, all mine, all designed to flick over into full execution mode with one trigger. I found it. Clause 9, spousal departure trigger. Voluntary exit by a spouse from the marital home with intent to dissolve union. Initiates asset isolation. Trust executes transfer of title property into private holding entity under primary grantor, me, and revokes spousal claim via signed postnup. All I had to do was click execute. So I did. One click. No dramatics. Just a green progress bar crawling silently across the screen. The house titled under Whitmark Holdings LLC Trust now formally prohibits third-party occupation without grantor consent. The brokerage accounts reassigned, beneficiary scrubbed. Her car, the one I gifted her last birthday, transferred to the trust as collateral asset, released under a corporate fleet title. Let her argue ownership with a VIN that doesn't match her insurance. Every single element that looked like shared life had always been mine, just wrapped in prettier paper. She never once asked how the mortgage disappeared, or how the second lake house was just a timeshare. She never questioned why I was so diligent about paper trails and quarterly audits even in retirement. Carla thought she married a man who feared chaos. She didn't realize she married a man who prepared for betrayal. I opened the secondary safe, pulled out the sealed envelope marked CAW activation. Inside were 4 things. The original post-nuptial agreement, a notarized affidavit I'd pre-written 3 years ago, a USB with time-stamped activity logs, and a final letter addressed to her attorney and signed until now. I picked up the pen and wrote 3 words at the bottom. Let's proceed accordingly. Signed it, dated it, slid it back in the envelope, and set it on the outbound tray. Then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't the first time I'd imagined this moment, but I'll admit, it landed with a heavier silence than I expected. Not grief, just absence. Like when a noisy appliance suddenly shuts off and you realize how loud it had always been. For 15 years, Carla filled the house with small demands and casual complaints. She'd mastered the passive sigh, the way of saying "Mark" seriously, like it was her favorite punctuation. Now, the house was quiet, and I finally had room to think. One by one, I reviewed the status of each lockout. Primary residence reassigned, financial accounts redirected, joint obligations nullified via clause activation, digital accounts 2-factor on, access revoked. She could still log into Netflix. I left her that. I'm not a monster. And then just before midnight, I executed one final command. Notify counsel. Structure active. My attorney's phone would ping at 8:01 a.m., not before. He'd find the signed docs, the logs, the video timestamp from the door cam showing her departure. No drama, just structure. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was architecture. Tomorrow, that's when she'd try to draw blood. But she'd realize the knives weren't hers anymore. The next morning, I was making coffee when my phone busted. Not a call, not a text. An alert from a private social media monitor I'd set up years ago, originally to track corporate mentions back when I was still active in the audit world. Old habits die hard. I'd forgotten I'd left her profiles on the list.
There it was. Public post image. Carla leaning in close to her ex, Stephen. The walking midlife crisis. His arms slung around her like he'd won a prize. Both of them holding champagne flutes, smiling like prom night. Came back with Botox and back pain. Caption: real love always finds its way back. Clinking glasses. Hashtag finally free. Posted at 9:27 a.m. I stared at it for a full minute. Not because it hurt, not because I missed her, because of the timestamp. 9:27 a.m. And not today, yesterday. Roughly 3 hours before our anniversary dinner, before the salmon, before that I never really loved you, before the fake tears and staged suitcase. She had taken that photo before she even told me, while I was at the florist picking up the roses. The same roses she pretended to admire at dinner before gutting me in 3 sentences. That photo, that smug little caption. It wasn't just tasteless. It was a legal landmine. I opened the post nub and flipped to Clause 9b. Pre-planned abandonment with intent to defraud marital fiduciary. The clause had a threshold premeditation demonstrated by time-stamped third-party behavior occurring prior to marital exit. Why? Because during post-nup negotiations, my attorney had asked one single question. What if she's already left emotionally and only staying to get the payout? So, we wrote the clause in. If evidence emerged showing intent to exit before informing me, and that intent involved alternative romantic engagement or concealed communications, she forfeits all claims to joint assets. Evidence like, say, a selfie with her ex time-stamped. I opened a secure tool and downloaded the full EXIF metadata from the image. Confirmed GPS time zone device model. Uploaded the report into my asset protection log. Violation confirmed. The legal structure just evolved from passive shield to active weapon. What Carla thought was a champagne celebration was actually a signature. She just didn't realize it. I forwarded the image and the metadata to my attorney with a single subject line. Clause 9b. Activation. No message body. He'd understand. Then I clicked on the comments under her post. 37 likes, a few heart emojis, the usual dopamine bait. One comment from her best friend, Michelle. You deserve happiness. 2 hearts. I told you he'd come back. Michelle, the woman who borrowed $4,000 from me for dental work last year and ghosted me afterward. Interesting. Another comment, buried deeper, caught my eye. From Carla's hairdresser. Wait, is this from yesterday morning? I thought you said you were still deciding what to do. She replied, LOL, shh, shushing face. Don't expose me. Face with tears of joy. Expose you. Oh, sweetheart, you already did. I saved a screenshot, printed the thread, highlighted the line. Don't expose me. My attorney would appreciate the irony. I closed the browser and leaned back in my chair, watching the steam rise from my coffee. A quiet morning, birds chirping. Somewhere across town she was probably riding high on ego and dopamine. She had no idea what she just triggered. See, when most people think of betrayal, they picture bedroom scandals, text messages, phone logs. But the real betrayal isn't about sex. It's about intent. That's what Clause 9b was built for. Not catching someone cheating, catching them scheming. And now? Now it was Carla who'd left the trail. Not me, not Stephen. Her post, her caption, her lie, and now her collapse. It wouldn't come today. That's not how precision works. But it would come, because in my world,
The only thing more dangerous than a smug liar is one who timestamps the crime. The call came in just after noon. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code downtown firm. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Mr. Whitman," the voice was young, overly cordial, probably fresh off a podcast about disrupting family law. "This is Mark." "Great. I'm Tyler Preston, counsel retained by your wife, Carla Whitman." I wanted to reach out directly before we proceed with formal filings. His tone dripped with polished arrogance, the kind that comes with custom cufflinks and a leased Tesla. "Go on," I said, sipping my coffee. "I'll be drafting a petition for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. Naturally, my client is entitled to equitable division of marital assets. We'll be claiming her fair share of the primary residence, brokerage accounts, and any jointly held vehicles." "Mom, if you have counsel, they can contact me directly. But I thought a professional courtesy call might smooth things out. You know, avoid unnecessary drama." His mistake wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. He assumed I was passive, a confused retiree surprised by the modern rules of the game, a man caught off guard. What he didn't know was I'd met with his senior partner 8 years ago at a charity gala, discussed asset shielding, risk mitigation. Back then, I was just Carla's quiet husband. I listened, took notes, studied the game, then built a better one. I clicked into my files, dragged one document into a fresh email. Subject: Whitman versus Whitman, preliminary note attached. Copy of fully executed postnuptial agreement. Asset distribution memo. Trust structure outline. Clause 9B. Trigger activation log. Timestamped evidence bundle. Exhibit A. Social media post. No body text. No sign-off. I clicked send. The call went dead silent. "Mr. Whitman," he finally said, voice a little tighter. "You want to read the attachment, Tyler?" I will click. I didn't pace. I didn't gloat. I just waited. 6 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Same number. I let it ring a bit longer this time. "Mr. Whitman," he said, now sounding like someone who just watched his firm step on a landmine. "Yes? Hi. I spoke with my client before initiating contact. She informed me she was unaware of any active structural encumbrances on the marital estate." She didn't mention a postnup or the trust. No, she wouldn't have. She never asked. Look, this is going to require internal review. The trust, the clauses, the time-stamped post. This changes a lot." "Correct." A pause. Then the voice dropped into something resembling panic, barely masking it with legalese. "My God, what did she say to you yesterday?" I smiled into the phone. "She told me the truth, finally." Click. No follow-up. I leaned back in my chair, watching the screen. The email had been opened 5 times already, forwarded twice, accessed once on a mobile device. Standard legal triage. I could picture the scene. Carla smugly sipping something with bubbles while her lawyer read the clause aloud, his jaw slowly tightening with every sentence, her face falling when she realizes that the boring man she mocked had just pre-closed the entire battlefield. I never needed to win the fight. I'd already removed the weapons. She thought she was starting a war. She hadn't even noticed the gates were welded shut. And her lawyer? He was her first casualty. A man who walked in thinking he was dealing with a clueless retiree and walked out holding a legal grenade with the pin already gone. The trust didn't just protect me. It dismantled the assumption that this would be fair. Carla had written a script where I was the shell-shocked husband. What she didn't realize? I was the editor. Carla walked into the bank like she was claiming a prize. Fresh hair, big sunglasses, an outfit just casual enough to suggest she hadn't been crying in her ex's condo all morning, which she had. But now she was on a mission.
She figured she'd start rebuilding her independent life by draining the accounts she assumed were half hers. She even hummed a little tune on her way in. The woman at the counter greeted her warmly at first. "Hi, how can I help you today?" "I'd like to withdraw from our joint savings and transfer some to my new checking under Carlo Whitman." The teller typed, paused, squinted. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not seeing your name on the account." Carla's voice sharpened. "Excuse me. We've banked here for 15 years. Look it up again." The woman looked nervous now. "It's not that the account doesn't exist. It's that your name isn't attached to it anymore." Carla's lips curled like a hairline fracture. "That's impossible."
I can get the branch manager if you'd like.
"Yes," she snapped. "Do that." She stood stiffly, arms folded, watching through the glass as the manager. Thomas, a soft-spoken man with polite eyes and absolutely no tolerance for drama, walked out with a file in hand. He gave her a sad little smile like a doctor about to deliver test results. "Mrs. Whitman," he said gently, "please come with me." They stepped into a small side office. He closed the door behind them. "This is absurd," Carla started. "I need access to." Thomas raised a hand and opened the folder. "I just need to show you this." Inside were 2 notarized documents. The first, a beneficiary reassignment form removing her name from all major accounts triggered by breach of Clause 9 in a marital contract. The second, a notarized directive dated 6 years ago, signed by both me and Carla, though she'd clearly forgotten. It authorized the financial institution to transfer ownership in full to the primary account holder, me, in the event of marital abandonment, confirmed by legal advisor. Carla's jaw clenched. "This has to be a mistake. I never—" Thomas pointed to her signature. "You signed this on April 14th, 2017, right here with a witness present. Our notary remembers you, said you joked about how ridiculous all these what-ifs were." She stared at the paper like it had just slapped her. Then her voice rose. "You can't do this. I need that money. I have bills. I have rent." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, lowering his voice but keeping his spine straight. "The accounts are no longer in your name. There is nothing for you to access here." Carla slammed her hands on the desk. "Then open his accounts! I was his wife!" He slid the folder toward her. The document says, "Was" is the key word. She stood up so fast the chair scraped behind her. "You think you've won? He can't just cut me off." But the look on Thomas's face told her everything she didn't want to hear. He wasn't judging her. He was pitying her. Security didn't need to be called. She left on her own. No dramatic exit, no screaming match. Just a stunned woman walking back through the lobby, sunglasses on again to hide the panic swelling in her eyes. Outside, she sat in her car, hands on the wheel, breathing like someone had just run a vacuum hose into her lungs. No money, no fallback, and not a soul she could scream at to fix it. Because it was her name on the exit plan, her time-stamped betrayal, her signature on the clause. What she'd walked in with was arrogance, a belief that divorce was just a hostile negotiation with a cash prize. What she walked out with was nothing. Not a penny, not a bank statement. Just a thin line of sweat on her brow, and the sinking realization that this wasn't going to be the clean break she imagined. This was war, and she was already losing. By mid-afternoon, Carla was done pretending things were fine. The bank had blindsided her. Her lawyer stopped returning texts, and even Michelle, her ever-loyal echo chamber, suddenly had bad signal and a thing with her kids. But Carla told herself it was just a phase, a minor setback. She still had this, her little haven,
The condo Stephen had shown her just weeks ago.
Modern fixtures, clean lines, no framed photos of her boring past. Just new air, scented candles, and Stephen's whiskey bottles lining the minimalist shelves like status symbols. Her fresh start. She parked out front, still seething, but already mentally writing her comeback arc. She'd text Stephen. They'd order sushi, maybe open champagne again. Post something spicy on Instagram to remind the world she was unfazed until she got to the door. Yellow notice taped across the wood like a slap in the face. Lease terminated. Vacate within 48 hours. Her eyes darted across the page. It wasn't from the landlord, not even the property management company. It was signed by Hollowmark Properties, LLC. In smaller text below that, Asset Manager, M. Whitman. Her brain stalled. She tore the paper down and fumbled through her purse, stabbing at her phone until she got the property manager on the line. This has to be a mistake. I live here. I've lived here for weeks. Ma'am, Hollowart Properties has issued a lease termination as per discretionary clause outlined in corporate leasing terms. You are not the primary lay. What the hell does that mean? I've paid rent. The primary lay, Stephen Marlowe, has been notified. The termination comes from the holding entity. All fees are being waived, but the unit is no longer available. But why? Who the hell is Hollowmark? There was a pause on the line. I can't disclose internal ownership, ma'am. But he didn't need to. Carla's eyes dropped to the bottom corner of the notice. There it was. Tiny watermark logo. Same font I'd used for our estate plan branding. A stylized M.W. inside a square. Mark Whitman. She was still trying to process it when Stephen opened the door behind her, holding a sandwich and looking like he'd just woken from a nap. "Babe," he blinked. "What's going on?" She shoved the paper in his face. "Did you know about this?" He scanned it lazily, then again, slower. Hollowmark. I thought the building was managed by some Westbridge thing. Apparently they're owned by Hollowmark. He looked up, face paling. "Wait, are you saying your husband owned this place?" Carla didn't answer because she didn't know, because she'd never asked. She'd been too busy playing liberated to consider that her entire rebound was built inside walls I'd already paid for. The keys she carried still technically belonged to a holding company registered in a trust she'd never read. Stephen walked back inside, rubbing his face. This is a nightmare. I signed a 1-year lease. They can't just... They can, Carla snapped. Apparently he can. Stephen muttered something under his breath and retreated to the kitchen. Not a comforting hug, not an I got you, just silence and distance. His default settings when women raised their voices. Carla stood in the entryway, still gripping the notice. Her fresh start owned her safe space revoked, the man she'd run to already checking his emails instead of her face. She slowly backed out, sitting on the condo's stone steps, legs shaky. She looked at the cars passing by on the street, wondering how many things she still thought were hers would turn out not to be. She thought she'd escaped into something new. What she didn't realize was that every move she made had been pre-mapped. Every step forward, still inside my perimeter. She didn't leave the battlefield. She wandered deeper into it. And now, even the walls were betraying her. The call came just after midnight. I knew it would. Haley had always been the one person Carla couldn't manipulate easily. But blood still tugs at blood, and daughters still crave explanations. Dad. Her voice was cautious, not cold. That's how I knew she hadn't chosen sides yet. I just got off the phone with Mom. She's not doing well. I didn't say anything. She said you froze her accounts, that she has nothing, that you've been planning this behind her back for years. I took a long breath, not because I was angry, but because I could hear the fork in her voice. Standing at that intersection between instinct and truth, she says, "You ruined her life." I reached for the black binder on my desk, not the legal one. This one was thinner, personal. The only copy of the postnup with annotations in blue ink made specifically for Haley back when she turned 18 and started asking questions about estate plans and why her name didn't show up on any joint assets. Section 12. I said, she paused. What? Section 12 of the postnup. The clause about beneficiary exclusions in cases of active deceit or abandonment. Read it. Another pause. Then, can you send it to me? No need. It's in your Dropbox. Same folder as your student loan breakdown. Documents named contingency_writer full, PDF. You saw it 3 years ago. Haley just never read it. Silence. I let it hang. Look, she finally whispered. I don't care about the money. I need to know if she's telling the truth. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Then don't listen to either of us. I said, check her phone. Start with August. Search for the name Stephen. More silence. I could almost hear her pulse over the line. You knew? I've known longer than she thinks. I heard her swallow. The call ended soon after. She didn't say goodbye. The next morning, nothing came. No follow-up text, no angry voicemail. Just silence. A quieter kind of loyalty. But around 6:30 p.m., I got a single email from her university account. Subject, I read it. No buddy text, no signature, just an attached PDF. Screenshots of Carla's messages with Stephen. Can't wait to be free of him. I'm so tired of pretending. I keep the prenup in the guest bedroom drawer. I think I can make him sign a revision if I catch him tired. If he dies, everything goes to Haley, which I guess is fine. She'll share it with me anyway. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She already had. Carlo must have felt the silence before she understood it. 3 missed calls to Haley, then 5, then 9. She finally left a voicemail. Sweetheart, I need you to understand what he's doing. He's brainwashing you. And that was it. That's what did her in. Not the bank, not the condo, not even the trust. It was losing the one person she assumed would always remain neutral. Because Carla's greatest delusion wasn't thinking I'd roll over. It was believing her daughter didn't have a spine. Haley didn't reply. She changed her voicemail the next day.
Hi, you've reached Haley Whitman. Leave a message. Not Haley Marlowe.
The name Carla had once tried to force on her in middle school. Not Haley Lane, the weird hybrid Carla liked when she was daydreaming about a fresh start and making Stephen her stepfather. Just Haley Whitman. It turns out, when given the choice between shared blood and live truth, Haley didn't hesitate. She didn't pick the mother who fed her fairy tales over sushi dinners. She picked the man who never lied, not about his flaws, not about his limits, not even about his silence. In the end, Carla didn't just lose a husband. She lost her witness, and without one, her story didn't matter anymore. Stephen Marlowe had always fancied himself a charmer, the kind of man who could walk into any room, flash a smile, and walk out with someone else's wife, job, or dignity, depending on what he wanted that day. He hadn't changed much since college. Newer veneers, tighter shirts, at least Audi with more tech than brains. But under the surface, same man, same bluff. He thought he was getting the better end of the deal when Carla came back. You're glowing, he told her that first weekend in the condo. He never deserved you.
She had soaked it in like a plant finally getting watered, ignoring, of course, the cracks in the pot. Stephen hadn't asked questions, didn't want to know about prenups or legal separation windows. As far as he was concerned, Carla had handled it. She talked like the assets were hers already. She laughed about me, called me Doxel Mark, said I'd probably cry in the shower for a month and hand over the passwords eventually. She painted a picture of a man broken, gullible, easy to outmaneuver. And Stephen, drunk on ego and half-prac champagne, believed her until the knock on the door. He opened it to find a man in a black polo holding a clipboard. Stephen Marlowe. Yeah, you've been served. Thick envelope, cream paper, real ink. Inside, a civil lawsuit filed under the jurisdiction of the state. The plaintiff, Mark Whitman. The claim, intentional interference with a fiduciary asset structure. Stephen scanned the page with growing confusion, then dread. Unjust enrichment, tortious interference. The term constructive fraud was bolded. 3 exhibits were listed. One was a printout of the champagne photo Carla had posted, the one he was so proud of. Another was a transcript of text messages between him and Carla, complete with timestamps that predated the formal separation. But the third, a lease document from the condo signed by Stephen under a clause that acknowledged receipt of property use consent from joint marital assets holder. The checkbox Carla had forged. And that was the catch. She didn't have the right to sign that line because she never owned the asset, which meant Stephen had occupied property, benefited financially, and participated in the concealment of marital property under false pretenses. His face went pale. He called Carla. She didn't answer. He texted, "What the hell is this lawsuit? You said everything was joint. You said you had this handled." The typing bubble appeared, then stopped, then nothing. Because she didn't have it handled. She never did. He had believed her because she was pretty and angry and confident. And that's a dangerous combination for a man who's been coasting through life on other people's trust. By that evening, he was sitting across from his own attorney, older, sharper, with a glare that said, "I can already tell you screwed this up. You let her sign real estate forms on property you never verified. She said she owned it. Did you check?" I didn't think I needed to. His attorney, "Son, this isn't about heartbreak. It's about fiduciary fraud." Stephen swallowed. "Can I just apologize? Settle? You can try, but if they don't want money, if they want precedent, you're in for hell." And that's when it hit him. This wasn't about squeezing him for a payout. This was about making sure no man would ever feel safe stealing someone else's wife. And assuming that meant he could also steal their life, their home, or their name. Stephen was never the real prize. He was the instrument, the scalpel Carla used to cut away her old life. But what neither of them realized, the handle was still mine, and now the blade was turning. She requested the meeting like she still had leverage. "Tell him I want to see him in person." Her message to my lawyer read, "He owes me that much." Owes her, that word again. Like the 15 years I spent cleaning up her chaos, shielding her credit score, or quietly paying off the car loan she co-signed for her deadbeat brother weren't enough. Like I hadn't already repaid the debt 10 times over with silence, with stability, with restraint. But I said yes because by then I understood something she still didn't. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about her needing an audience. We met in a neutral downtown building, 3rd floor, conference room with a long walnut table and glass walls. Her lawyer didn't come. He'd already recused himself after realizing how far and over his head he was. Probably didn't want to be in the room when the iceberg surfaced. I arrived 5 minutes early. She showed up 9 minutes late. Sunglasses, dark lipstick, that blazer she always wore when she wanted to look put together. But it didn't hide the panic in her eyes. Her confidence had thinned into brittle defiance. "Nice room," she said, sitting down without a greeting. I slid the folder across the table. She didn't touch it. "What's this?" she asked, already annoyed. "Your life on paper?" I said. She flipped it open, expecting noise. Instead, she found silence and typed face. Exhibit A, the social media post with Stephen, timestamped, geolocated. Exhibit B, transcripts of text retrieved from her synced cloud backup. Flotations while still married. Jokes about dismantling Mark slowly. Exhibit C, audio of her phone call with Michelle. The part where she said, "I'll make him think I'm still on the fence, just long enough to cash out." Her hand stopped on that page. She looked up. "You recorded me?" "No," I said. "Michelle did." Apparently she thought she was the real co-conspirator. Turns out betrayal doesn't come with loyalty programs. The color drained from her face. Then came the clause. I had bookmarked it for her. Section 14. Be any attempt to emotionally coerce, manipulate, or intentionally mislead the grantor for financial benefit shall result in full forfeit of claim to all marital or trust assets. She read it 3 times. When she spoke, her voice cracked. "This is insane." "No," I said, "it's notarized." She gritted her teeth. "You can't just erase me like this." "I didn't erase you. You walked out of the ledger yourself. I just closed the book." "You think this makes you strong?" "No, it makes me free." She flipped a few more pages. There were financial triggers she didn't understand. Automatic liquidations, auto transfers, clawbacks, things she'd never asked about while she was too busy pretending our marriage was a cage. "You hid all this from me." "You never looked," I said calmly. "You were too focused on what you deserved to notice what was protected." She closed the folder, shaking. "This wasn't love." "No," I replied. "You didn't love me." And then I looked her dead in the eye. "But I love the law." For the first time, she didn't have a response. No quip, no gaslight, no crocodile tears. Just silence. The kind that fills the space after a gavel falls. She stood up too fast, knocking her chair slightly off balance. "I hope you're proud of this." I nodded slowly. "I am." She opened the door to leave, paused, almost said something, then walked out. No goodbye, no performance, just the hollow echo of high heels down a hallway she didn't own. The room stayed still. All that remained was the folder, still warm where her fingers had been, and the unmistakable weight of a war concluded. Not with victory music or cheers, but with a ledger perfectly balanced, and a woman finally understanding what it means to be outmaneuvered by the man she never bothered to understand. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No courier, no doorbell, no signature required. Just an unassuming white packet slipped into Carla's mailbox like any other piece of suburban noise. She didn't even notice it at first. Not until late afternoon when she finally summoned the will to walk to the end of the driveway. Wrapped in a cardigan 2 sizes too big, wearing yesterday's mascara and 3 days of regret, she tore it open half-heartedly, expecting another legal update. Maybe some dry filing about next steps or a tentative court date. What she got instead was finality. Inside were just 2 documents. The first was titled, Notice of Irrevocable Dissolution, her private marital trust authority. The second, Executed Transfer of All Marital Entitlements Voided.
No judge's name, no county stamp, no docket number, because this wasn't filed through the family court system. It had come directly from the trust administrator, and it was done. Every remaining claim she had, assets, alimony, even her name on property ledgers, had been invalidated. Not negotiated, not reduced, voided. Because under the private trust we both signed, the moment she breached Clause 9, and later Clause 14, the dissolution process could be activated and completed solely through the administrative process outlined in the marital framework. The courts were never needed. I had built the ending into the beginning. She read and reread the cover letter, hands trembling now, her pulse thudding behind her eyes. Effective the moment you told me you never loved me. That was the line. No threats, no anger, just a time-stamped knife in plain text. Carla stood in her tiny kitchen, what was left of her grand escape, and looked around like she was trying to remember how this all began. The champagne, the photo, the laugh, all of it had evaporated. Stephen was gone, moved out 2 weeks ago after the lawsuit notice came. Said he needed to rethink some things, and disappeared back into his ex-wife's orbit, where the drama at least came with shared custody and a pre-owned BMW. Michelle wasn't answering calls anymore. The condo was reclaimed by Hollowmark. The lease termination never even made the news. Even Haley had gone quiet. She sat down at the chip table, folded the papers, then unfolded them again, like they might change if she blinked hard enough. Then she picked up her phone. Last contact. Tyler Preston-esque. She stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. He wasn't just unavailable. He was done because no lawyer likes to stand in a courtroom holding an empty briefcase and a disgraced client. She opened her gallery app reflexively like a ghost looking for its reflection. Scrolled back to the photo with Stephen, the one with the champagne. It was still there. Same pose, same smirk. But now the image made her sick. She tapped delete, then stopped because that photo was the trigger. The moment she chose fireworks over foundations, and you don't delete a tombstone. The room around her was too quiet. No humming dishwasher, no music, just the refrigerator compressor clicking on and off like a tired metronome. She picked up the letter one last time, ran her fingers over the embossed seal. It was real, not a draft, not a threat, just the end. Not of a marriage, of a narrative. She'd spent years pretending I was a footnote in her story. She didn't realize I was the final editor, and now there were no more pages to